Again, namaste and welcome everyone for today's webinar on Reframing India in World History. My name is Ankur Patel. I'm the Director of Outreach for Hindu University of America, and our special guest is Dr. Lavanya Vemsani. Glad to have her joining us from Ohio. So let me give a quick background, but this concept of reframing India in world history is developing, it's ongoing, it's so important. This is definitely something we've been working at Hindu University of America in our own way, but Lavanya ji has written a whole book on this, and it is amazing to have her to share these details. And so in this conversation with Dr. Lavanya Vemsani, she's of course the author of this Reframing India and World History. She's challenging long-standing colonial narratives and invites us to rethink India's place in global history. Drawing from cutting-edge evidence-based research, Dr. Vemsani offers a compelling re-examination of India's past, one that's rooted in indigenous frameworks and cultural continuity. So this thought-provoking webinar, what we're going to get into, we're going to take your questions, we're going to engage you. We're going to explore how traditional depictions of Indian history have been shaped by colonial interpretations and why it's vital to revisit these narratives through lenses grounded in India's own civilizational patterns. So from ancient cultural traditions to the impacts of conquest and colonization, Dr. Vemsani uncovers the deeper historical currents that have defined India across millennia. So thank you for joining. If you're already a student, if you're thinking about joining HUA, if you're just curious about global history, whatever it is, we're glad to have you with us today. And if you haven't yet, please put in the chat where you're zooming in from, and I can give you a quick shout out. We've got Naranji from Bay Area. We've got Mananji from Oregon. Thank you everyone for joining. Now let me introduce our guest, Dr. Lavanya Vemsani. She herself is an award-winning scholar and professor of history, specializing in Indian history and religions. Professor Vemsani is the Board of Trustees Distinguished Professor of History in the Department of Social Sciences at Shawnee State University. Lavanya ji is also the honorary visiting professor in the School of Historical Studies at Jawaharlal Nehru University, JNU. Glad to have some of our folks at JNU presenting our perspectives. Professor Vemsani has won a number of academic awards and honors, including the Research Professor Award, a Fulbright Global Fellow Award, Shastri Indo-Canada Postdoctoral Research Award, and Best Canadian PhD Dissertation on South Asia in 2007 by Canadian Asian Studies Association. She is now the editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Indic Religions, or UORA, from 2020 to 2023, associate editor of the Canadian Journal of History and the Journal of Indo-Pacific Affairs. The introduction goes on. She's accomplished. She's an amazing scholar who's been publishing, who's been lifting up this new framework of India in world history for years now. And it is really my pleasure to have Lavanya ji with us today. We had the honor of connecting at a Yuva conference last year. And since then, I've been meaning to get her on for one of our webinars about this amazing book. So it is my pleasure to welcome you, Lavanya ji. Dr. Lavanya Vemsani, thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you so much, Ankurji, for a great introduction. Thank you. And I'm honored to be here to speak about India.
Yes, so
Indian history.
Yeah.
Indian history and India is close to my heart. Working on Indian history had been a long-standing passion of mine. Have written many books on it, but the recent book, Reframing India, actually tackles Indian history from the beginnings to today. So that's what I'm talking today. My subject of my lecture today is the Reframing India in world history. This discusses the Indian history and how we need to study Indian history, how we need to take Indian history forward by rescuing it, by reclaiming it from the colonial shackles, the colonial frameworks that were put on Indian history. India had a long history, but the twisting and the colonial frameworks have changed history so much. So in today's lecture, I'll be focusing on India's history, past and present, how the constructions have influenced Indian history. So this has four parts. The first part is India's history, past and present, how it was twisted and how it was changed. And then I will dive into the actual subject of the India, its naming conundrum, and how it influenced us. And I will be speaking about early constructions, and then I'll be speaking about the current plan, what the plan for present book, Reframing India in World History is. India and its history have always been closely entwined with the rest of the world. Unfortunately, India has never received the strategic position in world history that it deserves, whether in the presentation of its internal history or its impact on world history. Even though India played a major role in the world history, from the first strides of prehistoric humans to the modern era, it received only a few pages of twisted survey of its history. Prevalent constructions of India's history are tinged with colonial historical frameworks and presentation. Therefore, it is important to understand India's past based on self-determined frameworks derived from India's history to reclaim her place in world history. Therefore, this book discusses new chronological and historical frameworks based on the internal historical events of India. Previous historical scholarship centered on wars and battles and on finding large monuments missed the opportunity to represent the true history of India. If based on evidence, it might have helped with understanding the history that is representative of the true history of India, as is the case with the history of numerous other countries. But in the case of India, it remained a distant mirage. Wars are not central to India's history. Rather, what is central to progress of civilization of India is through civilizational shifts. I will be discussing civilizational shifts in a little bit. So the cultivation of great ideas that did not require huge wars or large material constructions immensely changed Indian history as well as world history. That's what is central to India. Ideas are central to India. Hence, in this book, patterns of civilization that are indigenous to India are explored to investigate India's history from the beginning to the present. It is important that any writing of India's history must incorporate crucial features central to India's history. Continuity for a long-held cultural notions, civilizational continuity beginning with the first steps of humans, and historical crises due to incessant conquests and colonization during the second millennium. This book focuses on providing this continuity and on providing a breakdown of the civilization of India from its foundations. So with this premise, to counter the narratives and to bring out the true history of India, with this goal, the reframing India in world history begins. So outsiders constructions focused on only bringing out outsider history, even if it was not there. They had to invent something to bring outside history to minimize indigenous achievements and indigenous history. So, for example, early history is twisted, and Aryan theory is introduced to begin Indian history from 1300 BCE, rather than early prehistoric era, which was true from evidence. But they have to discontinue the evidence. So, this is the outside patterns that are placed on India. So authentic patterns should be based on what is available in India and how we have to understand India. So therefore, I divide our history into 4 historical eras. So the foundational era, this begins in early prehistoric era in early Pleistocene and goes all the way until 1200 BCE. And from 1200 BCE onwards, it's formative era. Then it goes on with the golden age of prehistory, the golden prehistoric era in India. And this goes on to first millennium, and from the first millennium onwards, it's civilizational era. The civilization develops, and typical Indian features and the Indian civilizational era and ideas, of course, established in India, and they travel to the rest of the world. And that's the reason this is known as Indian era, civilizational era, and they also call it as Southernization. So this is, first millennium BCE and first millennium CE. And then second millennium CE, of course, there are invasions and wars and crises. So this is crisis era. So these are the 4 eras that we discuss in this book. So what's wrong with colonial history? When does this colonial history begin? So the colonial history begins as soon as the outsiders step in and start invading India. So historically, the invasions began in second millennium from after 11th century, 1030, anyway, 12th century established. But 1030, the invasions begin. So all of you must have heard about Al-Biruni's Al-Hind. Al-Hind, he begins noting down, and it's outside history, right? He's writing outside history of India. So Al-Biruni in his Al-Hind crystallized the colonialist narrative on how it might be. So he writes, the Hindus had no men of this stamp, both willing and capable to bring sciences to a classical perfection. Therefore, you mostly find that even the so called scientific theorems of the Hindus are in a state of utter confusion, devoid of any logical order, and in the last instance, always mixed up with the silly notions of the crowd. Immense numbers, enormous spaces of time, and all kinds of religious dogmas, which the vulgar belief does not admit of being called into question. So this shows his derogatory nature. He calls Hindus religion vulgar belief, and he doesn't understand the numbers and number theorems that Indians have written. So he writes it, immense numbers, enormous spaces of time. It doesn't understand all these concepts, and he writes such derogatory statement after he noted that he had seen Indian mathematics, Aryabhata's mathematical compendium, as well as other Indian texts being translated in Persia. So he had noted Indian sciences, the medicinal texts being translated. He noted the Indian mathematical texts being translated from Sanskrit in Persia. However, he still writes with this derogatory notion. So it's not that the outsiders do not understand Indian history, but they have crystallized a concept of Indian history in their mind, which denounces Indian achievements, which denounces Indian history, deconstructs and derogatorily presents Indian history. So that's what must be changed in understanding of India. So Britishers, Indian history writing in India began with the Britishers. So the Britishers brought in the theory, Aryan theory, some kind of invented race of Aryans. We don't know where they came from, how they came from, or what happened. There is no evidence for it, but it was a constructed term, constructed race, and it's so artificial that anybody can use it for any method. So I don't want to go into details about it because I have discussed it at a different place. And the outsiders also invented this notion of caste. Akbar is the first person to actually conceptualize and start a census regarding the castes of India. So he was the first one to record it. And this is, of course, taken over by the British forward. So the British used the race theory, and then they used the caste theory, and then they, of course, used the Aryan racial theory to deny any achievements of Indians. So yeah, all achievements that are positive in India are supposed to have been brought from outside. So this denies Indians their origins as well as their achievements. So with this kind of artificial racial theories, artificial construction theories, and equipped with outside derived periodization with ancient, medieval, modern, they don't apply to Indian history well. Indian history is constructed and of course, doesn't represent real history of India. Why? Because Indian history is derived, Indian history is characterized by civilizational shifts, not invasions. So India's history is determined by civilizational shifts, not by invasions. So what I meant by civilizational shifts is civilizational shifts happen when large-scale developments happen in different regions over the time period rather than in limited space, limited to one region or wars. A resource which is large civilization, like Indian civilization, which developed within the large space of Indian subcontinent, really did not need wars. It only needed civilizational shifts. So it evolves, civilization evolves by exploiting natural resources, by shifting rather than warring for limited resources. This is the case with India. Third millennium BCE civilization is prominent in the northern and northwestern India. And then, of course, civilization shifts. First millennium BCE civilization is prominent in eastern region of India. The first millennium CE civilization is prominent in northern and central India, while later first millennium civilization of India is dominant in southern India. Of course, second millennium brings crises from 1200 CE onwards, records crises due to invasions and incessant wars. Up to that point, from 1200 BCE onwards to 1200 CE onwards, different phases of Indian history evolve in different regions of Indian subcontinent and bring out great ideas that influenced the world history. So India, the name of India is always in question because outsiders want to deny the name of India for Indians, the name of Hindu, the name of India for land, Indian for people, and Hindu or Hindu for the religion. So in the ancient world, there is really no clear naming. The name of the people is applied to the land, to the religion, to the language, and to the practices of the people. So the name of India, of course, is derived as Bharata from Bharata, as we know from the stories of Bharata. And the lineage of Bharata is from the Soma or Chandra or Indu. So the ancestral lineage of Bharata is, of course, Indu, Chandra, or Soma. So, however, the colonial constructions have to deny this name for Hindus, right? So, Indians. So, it happened through two modes. So, the first mode is to construct a theory. The construction of the theory is Sindhu gave rise to Indu, and Persians used it first. Anyway, Persians didn't use it. Greeks used it first. And then, of course, they construct this theory. Sindhu, S is not there in Persian, so, it has to be changed to H, and then it becomes Hindu. What about DHU, dhu? Then the term dhu has to change to du. So that is also a problem. And Persian is a cognate language of Sanskrit, so it has all the alphabet and phonetic sounds that Sanskrit has. So it's not a problem to say S or H. Not a problem for Persian. This is just a construction, not true history. And the second thing they did was to diffuse the name of India. We'll talk about it shortly. So originally, India is called Hindu or Bharata from the Mahabharata. And Constitution of India includes both names very cleverly. Bharat, that is India. Of course, this has our historical origin. Bharata's lineage, as I told you, is Hindu, Moon, Chandra, or Soma from the Mahabharata. The land, the mountains, the ocean, everything is known by the same name because it's the people that gave their name to the practices as well as to the name, to the land, to the mountains, to the ocean. So Greeks were the first. Hecates Miletus is the first one to record the term Indoi, Indua, Indica for the land and the people and the religion. And of course, then it's used by Darius in his inscriptions, and then, of course, Xerxes. So, all in all, the term is recorded, of course, 2,600 years ago. But to be recorded 2,600 years ago, it should have been used at least 1,000 years before. So it should it should have been known at least by 1500 or 1300 BCE. So this is not a new name. This is not a new name that is brought in and given to us. This has been a name that was used forever, and it was also recorded in the text. So India and Indians is the designation of the land and the people as far as our civilization goes. So it should be at least 5,000 years old, even though the recorded history is only 2,600 years old. So, um, so uh, so the origins of humans, of course, is recorded in Satapada Brahmana, and the land, of course, the Jambu Dvipa is recorded to have been 280 to 250 million years ago. So the Pangaea crashed into India, and then, of course, it's constituted. So anyway, the name, of course, is as old as our civilization. So denial of the name by some colonialists are diffusing the name by using it everywhere else. Doesn't decrease the value of the name for India and Hinduism. The name is there for as long as we know our history. So current history of India, of course, new history of India began after independence in 1947. 75 years of independence, but we are still reading Marxist colonialist theories of history. Colonialist theory, of course, invader versus indigenous. Marxists changed it a little bit. They changed the invader to high class to low class. So it's a kind of, oppressor versus oppressed history. So, but the theory is the same. So they used this colonial framework of invader versus indigenous, changed it slightly to oppressor versus oppressed. The oppressor becomes this outsider, the invader, the Brahminical upper class, and the others are the oppressed, the lower class. So for Marxists, it was convenient, so they continued the colonialist theories. However, that is not the real theory. That is still the colonized history. We have understood this for a long time. Tagore has noted it very well in his book Gora. He remarked that India cannot be found in history books, Marshman's history book. That was the book used in colonial India to teach Indian history to school children. it was written by colonial administrators. So he notes the nature of Indian history and Indian psyche is like the caged bird. It still is the case, unless it is changed from this colonial narrative, colonial frameworks. Indian psyche is not going to be freed. The Indian true history is not going to be known. So, but the changes have begun slowly. Centrality of Indian history, India to world history has been noted in the Southernization, a theory of Southernization introduced by one of the historians, Linda Schaefer. So she coined the term Southernization, and then how this led to the transmission of ideas and civilization from India to the world at that time in the first millennium CE. The material, the ideas, and the culture and the Indian-centric Indian Ocean system in the first millennium CE. That's what she calls Southernization. So this has to be understood. Southernization doesn't come just by being there. It comes from civilizational developments that happened in India. So the current book addresses all these four eras. The first era is foundational era. Foundational era discusses first rights of humans from early Pleistocene era, from 2 million years ago to 1300 BCE, up to the Metal Age, up to Neolithic settlements, up to 10th century BCE, 12th century BCE. So up to the foundation of village settlements and then up to the foundations of Neolithic settlements. And the second age is the formative era. The Metal Age is found in different forms in India. So we have Bronze, Neolithic, Chalcolithic. We'll discuss the details. So this forms our formative era. All our basic cultures and our basic ideas and our civilizational beginnings can be traced to this formative era. So this is up to the first millennium BCE, and from first millennium BCE onwards, civilizational era. The civilization begins evolving and then it becomes central to the world. And we already discussed the Southernization. So the civilization of era of India continues to be dominate the world. And of course, the last and most difficult era, the fourth era, is the crisis era from 1200 CE onwards, during which we faced numerous outside invaders, colonization. There is 4 types of colonization because of all these invasions and outsiders coming into India. So that is discussed during the colonization era from 1200 CE to 1950. The colonial discussions of Indian history affected Indian history negatively by introducing Aryan theory, by making invasion central to Indian history, and then based on that theory, developing caste theory, as opposed to flexible jati kula that was practiced in India. That theory of practice of social system is actually discussed by Mackin Marriott in his theory of individual. Indians are not individual but individual. So so anyway, we have to understand our own concepts in our own way, not in this colonial way. So foundational era discusses these concerns, discusses the misunderstandings, because prehistory, early history of India is not discussed because they began Indian history only from 1300 BC onwards, because they had to place it as the arrival of Aryans or outsiders. But there is lots of history before that. So prehistoric, Pleistocene origins are our true beginnings. Our true beginnings, our first settlements actually are in formative era. So first village settlements, universal rule, all these begin in 12,000 BCE. Iron and Bronze Age settlements, thousands of sites all across India are found during this time. More than 400 Indus Valley sites are excavated. The Indus Valley sites give evidence of Hinduism, Shivalingas, Ravi, the leaf, the sacred leaf, and chakras. And many of the southern megalithic tombs also have this chakra pattern depicted. And Iron Age also shows many of these early imagery and also the numbers and symbols. The symbols that are sacred to us, like the leaf, banyan leaf, and all that, are depicted in these early civilization and early images. So Bronze Age, Neolithic Age, Chalcolithic Age spread across India, show typical Indian achievements. Kashmir, of course, is nowadays in discussion. Kashmir has one of the early Neolithic settlements in Barjahom and in nearby areas, Ladakh, and these areas. And numerous calendrical events, astronomical events are depicted on the rock surfaces in Kashmir, in Barjahom, and also in Sopore and in Ladakh. So these typically are dated to 3,600 BCE or so. And similarly, Iron Age, of course, begins early in southern India, southern Neolithic records. Lots of iron tools and iron age implements. Central University of Hyderabad actually had iron tools that can be dated between 2,400 BCE to 1,800 BCE. And similarly, recently, Tamil Nadu also showed 2,800 BCE to 2,400 BCE early Iron Age tools. So 3000 BCE iron, the earliest iron development, and of course, great cities are built across India. Some in Indus Valley, and of course many others in across Neolithic settlements across India. So the formative era is very important to bring out the early civilization of India. It shows numerous ideas that we see later on in Hinduism. For example, the Shivalingas, the Ravi leaf, and all these depicted, the chakra. All these depicted in early prehistoric, Neolithic, Bronze Age sites. And then these, of course, we see in our later practices. Vedas, of course, are also dated to the same era. So formative era is the beginnings of the civilization. And then, of course, the civilizational era from first millennium BCE onwards, and then it makes great strides. And Indian Ocean world system evolves here with the India in the center and the world connected. This is the reason the discoveries, early discoveries began with looking for India, because looking for these great center of civilization, the southernization, the material, the ideas, and the culture has reached East and West, that it has a central place in world history. Of course, once the discoveries began, the name India is given to every place that was reached by the early explorers. So lots of places in the Caribbean, lots of places in the Pacific, and everywhere else is known by the name India. So there are Indies everywhere, West Indies, East Indies, all kinds of Indies. So this shows the centrality of India before the actual second millennium histories, before the second millennium crisis. So large section of the book is dedicated to this, discussing the civilizational era and what happened during the civilizational era, and how the civilizational shifts actually influenced Indian history from one phase to the other, and then how the early phase of Indian history and how the later phase of Indian history represented here in the civilizational era is very important to understand the true history of India. This should not be downplayed because of the Aryan theory, which was done previously. From the 12th century onwards, of course, early colonization begins by invasions. We have four phases of colonization from 1200 BCE onwards. India doesn't have anything like ancient, medieval, or modern. The concepts of ancient or medieval, modern, these are actually derived from European history. They are not very suitable to understand Indian history. Indian history shows kind of civilizational shifts and movements rather than dark ages or feudalism or any of those kinds of narratives. Um, the real crisis, of course, begins in 12th century. Four phases of colonization, enslavement, colonization. Of course, it only ends in the 20th century of India with 1947 when the colonization ends. So Indian history, of course, should be seen as Indian history and authentic history. It should be derived from Indian evidence from inside rather than outside. We are not outsiders discovering history of India. We are insiders understanding history of India. So it should help us understand the true history of India, not some outsider's view of the history of India. So that's the real goal of this book. So it uses new frameworks in the form of what is central to India, what is derived from India's own evidence. So it brings out authentic history of India, new periodization of India, and new concepts such as civilizational shifts and crisis era with four phases of colonization as we understand through Indian history, not from outside history. So this should help us understand the original history of India. Thank you very much. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Yes. Wow, that was so good. I'm definitely looking forward to the book. There's so much information in there. Amazing. Thank you so much for that. We do have questions. And if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. Don't put them in the chat. It's a little bit hard to keep track of. Pooja from Indiana, thank you for joining. Martha and Robert from Virginia. Dilipji from Maryland, a regular. Vijay Kane from Houston, a friend of HUA. We'll share the recording. Arjita Ji is asking about Greeks. They came very early in BCE times. So are they considered foreign invaders as well? I think so. I don't know.
Why do you call them foreign invaders? They are our friends. Alexander, of course, came and left, and Seleucus, of course, was defeated by Chandragupta Maurya, and then they concluded a treaty. The treaty between Greeks, the Seleucus, the Seleucid Empire in Persia, and the Maurya Empire in India, recognizes the equality of Indians. It's a treaty of equality in trade, life, and everything else. And they did not occupy and colonize Indians, and they did not enslave Indians to sell in international markets. So I don't call them colonizers.
I think those are important distinctions. Yes. Interesting concept though, right? People always think anybody coming outside but exactly like
They're our friends. They did not come to colonize us. They concluded a treaty with us, and they came as friends.
Well, Alexander the Great, he's famous for being the conqueror, and maybe some of these other details are not as well known, right? People are always asking, even now, it's just in this last 5-10 years that he became at least in our circles, more common knowledge that it was Chanakya. It was that organization of princely states of kings and local folks that repelled him to the point where he didn't even want to fight. That's new, right? That's for me at least, and I think even for the common public consciousness. All right. Anything else on that topic that you'd like to touch on before we go to the next question?
Okay. Greeks were the first people to record India as admirers, as history, and I noted Hecate's Miletus. He regarded Indians, the terms Indoi, Indu, and Indua first, before Darius. Of course, we have been told this story of, Sindhu, Hindu, and all that from Persia. Not true. It was already recorded as Hindu and Hindu before the inscriptions. And of course, this idea of, the evidence has to come from writing is um, a modern concept. Names and terms and concepts are used in India in oral form before being written down. Mahabharata, of course, the internal dating is third millennium BCE, but it's written down. Its evidence comes from 800 BCE onwards. So 2,000 years before being recorded, it was already recorded as happened. So thinking about the written word as the beginning, twisted our history. Indians and Hindus actually always had oral history. The oral history records the origin of India and the word Hindu and all that to Mahabharata. So third millennium BCE. And it was, of course, recorded by the Greeks. The Greeks also mentioned Mahabharata, and Marxist historians love Herodotus, and Herodotus recorded Mahabharata. So, of course, Herodotus's records talk about 1300 BCE, Greek empires and India. So if we consider that as a record of India from 1300 BCE, then it should be there before. So our history is ancient, and it was recorded by the Greeks before it was recorded in Hindu, Sindhu, and all that theory. Of course, doesn't stand. And Greeks, of course, never came to colonize us. Alexander, of course, came, but he got injured and they had retreated. And then there was another war between Chandragupta Maurya and Seleucus. And of course, it was recorded that Chandragupta Maurya has defeated the Greeks. So it was not a colonization, it was not an occupation. It was a friendly treaty between Chandragupta Maurya and the Greeks. So if anybody is talking about colonization, that is wrong.
Very interesting. And then, one of the reasons why I wanted you on is because there's so many common misconceptions. We need actual scholars who've done the research, who can give that experiential context from their own work. Now, this whole thing about Sindhu, right? Hindu coming from Persian. I've heard that. I might have even said that before, but that makes so much sense, right? The oral language, the language, the discussions, the words come much before writing. And so you're saying that the evidence for India being derived from Hindu is much older than that, and partly from the Greeks.
Greeks.
Interesting. Interesting.
The even written record comes from Hecate's Miletus. He was, the first record. So before Darius's record.
See, and this is the other point, right? Who recorded what and what survived, right? We know so many.
That's also a
The
question, right?
Takshashila, there must have been records. There must have been documentations and our own historians who kept track of this and was destroyed. So maybe from that kind of context of we have a whole course called Reconstructing Hindu History. Dr. Rajvedam teaches that. Reframing India in world history is a parallel project, different name, but it's the same kind of figuring out what we lost and how do we set the record straight. So maybe in that context of the destruction of records, of our own history, what happened, who wrote it down, and then now we're reliant, some of it, on outside sources. for our own history. Is there some thoughts on that you'd like to share, and how? And this is why your work is so important, right? And you set it off, right? It's from an insider perspective where we're setting the record straight. And so I think you have some thoughts on this that you'd like to share.
So we have to look at three different sources when we are trying to write Indian history. Of course, archaeology is there. Of course, the textual history is there, the Mahabharata and the Vedas. Of course, the Vedas were misinterpreted to bring out this Aryan theory, but we can use it to set the record straight also. So the textual representation beginning with the Vedas, and archaeological representation beginning with the prehistoric settlements, Paleolithic, early Pleistocene, and then the genetic history. Our genetic history also dates us very ancient. So the Vedas, of course, the theory that they purported is not right. The Aryan theory is not right, but it shows we are here. We are here already by second millennium, third millennium, composing the Vedic texts and civilization. And this is also shown in Neolithic, Bronze, and Chalcolithic settlements across India. The settlements show the same symbols. The Vedas show the same symbols. The Vedic altars, Vedic the symbols are found in Indus Valley and other places. And so prehistory, of course, Shiva's Shaivism, we are discussing, as if it's found in first millennium BCE, but Shivalingas are found in Indus Valley sites and many other places. And of course, symbols of Vishnu are also found in prehistoric sites. So history of Hinduism, history of India in prehistory, and Paleolithic and Mesolithic, of course. But we have evidence of hand axes. Paleolithic hand axes are in many places. These hand axes are preserved, and so in some places, these Paleolithic hand axes are worshipped as Hanuman in some of the village shrines. I have seen them in Andhra Pradesh. So we have kept our symbols. We have kept our early material heritage that comes from Paleolithic age. But due to Toba volcanic eruption, the human destruction happened. So the genetic history only comes from 74,000 years ago. So our history traces us, our genetic history traces us to 74,000 years ago. So the genetic history, whatever the founders have, gave rise to us. So continuous evolution of humans is seen from 74,000 years ago. Continuous occupation, continuous prehistoric evolution is seen from 2 million years ago in India. So India really shows ancient beginnings. And occupation, of course, doesn't really happen. If anybody visited India, they visited India only as friends, not as colonizers or occupiers. Only the invasions and occupations and colonization that comes only in the second millennium BC from 1200 CE onwards. Of course, there were a number of invasions from 10th century or 7th century, a couple of invasions, but those don't matter. They came as invaders and they left. The colonization and wars, occupation only begins in 12th century CE. So the continuity is the biggest part of Indian history.
Yeah, and continuity comes up in so many different ways, and I really appreciate that focus and perspective, because the West's narrative is it's ancient, it's destroyed, we progressed beyond it, it's something else now, right? And that continuity piece is often lost. So I really appreciate that. That was the focus.
So what is the central feature of India, right? As, every culture has its own central feature. So India's central feature is perseverance against all odds. So it continues for a long time, even though there are crises.
Yeah. We have maybe 12, 13 questions in the Q&A box. I think there's some more in the chat. I'm trying to go through them. I've got the poll question up. If you haven't let us know about your webinar attendance, I'm going to end that poll. I'm going to share the results, and then I'm going to launch another poll about HOA courses, and then a little question that I think Dr. Lavanya ji will be interested in. So first-time attendees for HOA webinar, about 17 of you, thank you. The regulars, 21 of you, awesome. 40 of you have attended before. 26 people have taken a course at HUA, 6 enrolled in a program, 28 of you considering taking a course, awesome, glad to have you with us. This is, maybe you missed 1 week of this quarter, but you could still enroll if this quarter works out. And for the 18 of you not interested in courses, we're glad to have you on our webinars and joining and engaging in whatever way you can. So let me just launch this next question. I'm starting out with, should Dr. Lavanya Vemsani teach a course on reframing India in world history at HOA? Just to ask our audience, see if they're interested in something like that. If you're just interested in taking courses at HUA, let us know. If you're interested in enrolling in a program at HUA, just helps us follow up. So just have those questions going. So there's several questions that kind of hone in on that timeline, right? Different people have different timeline for different parts of the history. Everything, I mean, who's this? Somebody's saying Chanakya is now dated at 1600 BC. I'm like, okay, who dated it? And there's so many historians who are focusing on one aspect and then basing a historical timeline on that. And we know the Aryan invasion mythology is based on, just the linguistic aspect, and it's totally constructed. So as a historian, as a scholar, how do you shift through and sift through, search through, look through all these different historical evidences and then come to a conclusion in the whole context, right? We have so many other Hindu historians who aren't aligned on so many aspects, and people are throwing out numbers and timelines and dates that make it more confusing for the common person to say, yes, this is when this happened. You understand what I'm trying to say, so I'm sure you deal with this all the time. So if you could please share with us how you approach it and what your thoughts are on this milieu of Hindu historians and the different dates that we get on so many anchor points. You think that it's an anchor point. You can base the historical context on this, but not necessarily.
For Mahabharata, though, Mahabharata and Ramayana, B.B. Lal has done research. So we have textual evidence and then prehistoric evidence that was collated. So the internal dating of Ramayana, Rama's birth date, and then of course internal evidence of Mahabharata with Krishna's birth date around 3000 BCE. And of course, S.R. Rao has done research on Dwaraka and all these places. So 3000 BCE is contemporaneous with many of the Indus Valley sites and Indus Valley cities that were excavated in Gujarat, Rann of Kutch, and northwestern India. So some of the places were excavated, and Ramayana also collated by B.B. Lal. He has excavated Ramayana sites and collated them with late prehistoric sites. So there are efforts to collate textual sources with archaeological sites and understand them. So instead of going away on tangents about each aspect of history, we have to come up with this broad timeline. That's what I use in my book. The broad timeline, which is proved by the evidence. Of course, the early Pleistocene, 2 millennia ago, 2 million years ago, we have skeletons, human skeletons that were excavated in Sivalik Hills, and then of course Narmada Valley. So this shows occupation, so prehistoric occupation. With ground evidence, we can date our early beginnings to 2 million years ago, 2 MYA. And of course, then we have the Toba volcanic eruption. We have the late Paleolithic hand axes found in volcanic ash, Toba volcanic ash, in Jolapuram, and then in many places in Maharashtra, in Narmada Valley, and all that. So that also shows us there is this destruction and then recovery from civilization. Of course, Paleolithic sites, lots of Paleolithic sites, and then Mesolithic sites, only a few, and then quick change to Neolithics. So that shows us there is sudden change happening, and then there is this volcanic eruption. And of course, we have evidence from 7,400 years ago, the modern, anatomically modern humans, and of course, we are the continuation of those modern humans. So instead of going in tangents, this one theory, that one theory, we have to collate. We have to collate the archaeological evidence. We have to collate the literary evidence. For now, the beginnings are in 2 MYA, 2 million years ago. And then there are changes from 74,000 years ago. And then the real prehistory, village settlements and life begins in 12,000 years ago. So foundational era from 2 million years ago to 1200 BCE. From 1200 BCE to 300 BCE, it is formative era where our ideas are formatted, our books are written down. Before that, we have oral texts. So from this time onwards, we start writing them down, we start compiling them down, we start putting all our ideas into books, and then organizing them. Of course, we still continue to preserve them in our mind as oral text, but still, we start writing them down. So that's the real beginning of our ideas and setting them down. So concrete form. So that's the golden era of prehistory, the Bronze Age, Metal Age, and all that, up to 300 BCE. From 300 BCE onwards, of course, it's Indian ideas and Indian material and Indian concepts begin not reaching out. Not only in India that they are popular everywhere else. So this is found in in evidence from outside in China as well as in the West. So the Buddhist texts travel to West, and it becomes the text called Barlam and Josephat. So ideas have traveled widely, as well as material. So that's the civilizational era. So we have to use the concrete evidence that is available to us, and base our civilizational eras, our eras, on our own history rather than going in tangents. That will take us nowhere. We'll be lost in an array of directions.
Yeah. Let me just summarize that timeline again. So 2 million years ago, we start having kind of modern humans.
Not modern humans, the first humans.
The first humans, right? Homo erectus and the evolutionary phase, right? 74,000 years ago, about there is dramatic change, and now modern humans are starting to form. And then
modern humans may have reached earlier, but our evidence only goes back to 74,000 years ago because of Toba volcanic eruption. So they might have come before that.
That's again, the general kind of timeline. Then 12,000 years ago, we have civilization, nascent civilization forming, agriculture, and then that 12,000 to
300 BCE.
1200 or 12,000 to 300 BC is your formative era, is what you're calling it.
Formative era. That's when we compile all our knowledge into books and then, start teaching. And then we have our first gurukulas, first, all these things.
So that's 12,000 years ago to about 300 BC. So that's where, okay, great. and then as we went on. All
India
right.
was popular at that time. Outsiders wanted to reach India then at that time also.
Yeah, great. All right, we have crossed the hour here. We can take a few more questions. How are you on time, Dr. Vemsani?
I have to go in a few minutes, but
all right. So let me just end this poll, share these results. I think you can see this, right? Should Dr. Lavanya Vemsani teach a course on reframing India in world history at HUA? We have 23 people who say definitely. Maybe some prospective students not going to be able to teach a course this quarter. And I don't know if we've talked about it, but maybe it's something to think about in the future, depending on your schedule and availability. We'd be happy to have you. There's no doubt about that. Thank you for everyone else filling out the poll. If you're interested in courses, if you're interested in a program, our team will follow up and try to get you enrolled into one of our many courses. And we continue to offer more courses and connect with eminent Hindu leaders, scholars, faculty like Dr. Lavanya Vemsani, because we're on a similar mission. And we're just glad to have you with us today on this webinar. Lavanya ji, I'm so glad that we finally were able to have this webinar. So much information. I think we still have a lot more questions. You opened up so many topics, but the broad framework, the context, I think you've done it for a lot of our audience. You've reframed India in world history, at least with some of those hierarching points and some of those things that are really important. So with that, let me hand it to you for your closing thoughts, whatever you'd like to leave our audience with. Please do share. And again, my pleasure. Thank you for being on with us today. My pleasure.
All right. Thank you very much. I am honored to be here. So I request everyone to remember Indian history for its continuity. And the one quality that stands out India is its perseverance and endurance. So, I will leave you with that. And thank you all.
Thank you. Namaste, dhanyawad.
Thank you.